Okay, welcome to a football show here on the 440 Sports Network. A football show is presented by Sinkers Craft Beverages. That's right. Sinkers voted the best craft beverage the best craft beverage retailer by the Best of Nashville Scene Poll. Again, it's been tough times here in Titanland, and so be sure to enjoy the games, the weekend, whatever it may be with Sinkers Beverages. And by Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, real Texas barbecue in the BNA. Nick Suss is here. Jared Stillman in for Braden Gall. So Nick Suss, been quite a week in Titanland, eh?
It has. It truly, unfortunately, has been quite a week that we are used to. We've had this week so many times, and this was another one of those so many weeks.
So Mount Amy erupted. We were wondering when it would happen. This seems to be every year, every 6 months, every whatever it may be. Mount Amy has a plan, and she gets very excited, and they announce this revolutionary plan. And 12 months after that plan, or 6 months after that plan, whatever it may be, Mount Amy erupts, and there's a massive change to the plan. And this week it was Brian Callahan. Now, I want to separate the two between the Titans' dysfunction and Brian Callahan's deserving of a firing. So I want to start with the Callahan front here.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with them firing Callahan. You were in the locker room yesterday. It doesn't sound like the players really have much of a problem with them firing Callahan. Where are you on let's talk about the decision to fire Callahan in a vacuum outside of the bigger picture, which is the organizational dysfunction?
Yeah, I think of it a lot. Like when we talk about fourth down decisions, of this idea of, just because you got it doesn't mean you made the right choice. Just because you didn't get it doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. This is really similar. Fundamentally, the Titans weren't good. And whether or not you think it's eyewash, they weren't getting better. And I heard this growth narrative back in June, July. I'm sure you heard it. I'm sure everybody heard it. This is what they were talking about. The team wanted to get better. And they very clearly were not getting better. They had taken a few steps back from a team that finished with the worst record in the NFL. So from the pure logistical standpoint of the goal of the season wasn't being met, that makes sense to move on from a coach. Now, to do it after 6 games, something much bigger has to be at play. And we all understand this. But, I mean, this team wasn't very good. This was a very, very bad football team. We've all seen the quote in Mike Silver's story about worst football team that coach had seen in 25 years. I don't necessarily know if that's true. I haven't watched every football team in the last 25 years, but this is a bad team. This is a team that is going to compete with very, very few. And if you want to put that on the coach, if you want to put that on the players, we can parse who's to blame. I was asking players constantly in the locker room yesterday, you keep saying this is your fault. You keep saying that players make plays, that the coaches don't go out there and throw passes and make tackles. So how's it feel when the coach gets blamed? And everyone's just like, yeah, no, that's kind of exactly what's going through our heads is we thought we could fix it and we still think we can fix it. So what do we do? What do you do when this is not what we thought the problem was, but clearly this was deemed the problem?
So I guess I look at the Callahan thing, again, just Callahan in a vacuum and you've covered a lot of coaches. You've covered a lot of coaches who've gotten fired over the years.
Yes, I have.
But Callahan was a bad coach. And I think whether it was, just systemic stuff like knowing the rules, I mean, I thought that was really low end on his ability as a coach. And that spans over multiple years because there was the issue with the free kick in Miami where they didn't know the rules and they got lucky because they didn't know the rules. I think I had a problem with Callahan's ability to hold other people accountable. I felt like Callahan kind of always gave everybody the benefit of the doubt, always gave grace, always looked at the optimistic angle. The glass was always half full with Callahan. He'll get better, or, this, we learned from this and this'll, and I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of holding people accountable. And I think there was a lot of too much nice guy. in Brian Callahan. And then finally, I know this roster is bad. You know this roster is bad. They know this roster is bad. But I don't think it's this bad. Like, I think the Titans are a bad team. I don't think the Titans are head and shoulders the worst team in the NFL, which if Arizona didn't step on about 9 banana peels in the fourth quarter 2 weeks ago, they would be the worst team in the league because the Jets' losses are more competitive than the Titans' losses. So I think that this team is bad, but I don't think they're as bad as they have been playing, which again is a testament to just how bad the coach is.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where like I spent the entire training camp telling anyone who would listen that I think this year's roster is less talented than last year's roster was. Simply on the matter of they started last year with DeAndre Hopkins, they started last year with Ernest Jones. They went out and they made win now decisions last year. And we thought Snead was better, we thought Ridley was better. All of these things going into last year, we thought they had talent. The question was, would they be competitive? This year we went in knowing there wasn't very much talent around, but the thought was maybe these guys can be competitive. And the fact that the talent decreased and the level of competitiveness decreased, that's what you trace to coaching. Whether or not that's fair, it's the only thing that can be treated of why your guys are playing the way they're playing. Players play up and down to talent, and the fact that it's 2-3 weeks in and I'm asking and PK's asking and Gentry's asking and all these people are asking, hey, whatever happened to outplaying your ability? Whatever happened to playing better than we thought you were? Because it seems like other teams can do that. Why can't these guys do it? That's something whether or not it's fair to trace it to coaching, coaching is the motivating factor. It's the thing that makes you say, these players are more than they are, these players are less than they are, who are they playing for, what are they playing for? I listen to Callahan's speeches, I listen to him on the record, I listen to him off the record, all of these things. I understand what he's preaching. He is a really good communicator. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But there was some mistranslation between the clear communication and the actual execution of that plan. And whether that is a crisis of motivation, whether that is a crisis of intention, whatever we want to call it, there was a crisis. It didn't work. The thing he was communicating very clearly did not translate. And if the job of a coach is to be a therapist, that part wasn't the part that was hitting. And so would the plan have worked? Honestly, I'm skeptical. I was never a huge fan of the actual offensive plan. But I also see where there were open players. I see where it could have worked. I see where more talent maybe could have fed into it. But there was that one disconnect that good coaches don't have.
My theory on Callahan is I think Callahan majored in the minors, and I think he did communicate well, but I think he was communicating well if you were listening. So if you were listening to Callahan, like you were listening to Callahan to do your job, you're like, okay, this guy is explaining things more than the average coach does, and some of the things he says do make sense. But I think when it comes to coaching a group of players, there really has to be about 3 or 4 basic principles, and those just need to be hammered away every single day.
Sure.
And I don't think Callahan did a very good job of that. The other thing is, again, I think Callahan worried about shit that just didn't matter. I think Callahan was spending too much time worrying about YouTube videos, which I get when you've got an absentee owner who's probably keeping up with your team through what her uninformed son-in-law is telling her and what she sees on YouTube. I understand wanting to say things like, hey, let's get these good YouTube videos out there that make it look good, but that's not going to help you build a football team. And I felt like Callahan majored in the minors. I feel like right now Chad Brinker probably majors in the minors. And I think as an organization, that is a big problem. And I don't think Callahan helped it. I also think that the Titans went looking for the exact opposite of Mike Vrabel when they hired Brian Callahan. And while Vrabel has his faults, the one thing that Vrabel is a good coach. And so when you go looking for the exact opposite of Mike Vrabel and you say, okay, we got the exact opposite of Mike Vrabel, well, you're getting the exact opposite of a good coach. And I think that probably also was an issue in the big picture. And then I also think if Callahan was ever going to have a chance, I think he would have needed an experienced general manager that when he got the job could really guide him along. And I think that Rand Carthon was probably more of a partner than he was a boss or a guider. And I certainly don't think that Mike Borgonzi or Chad Brinker have the type of experience to be able to help the coach learn how to be a coach. So whereas John Harbaugh, not to say that Callahan's John Harbaugh, but whereas John Harbaugh goes to a team where Ozzie Newsome is the general manager, and I think Ozzie can kind of help John Harbaugh as a rookie coach along, or Mike Tomlin goes to a team where Kevin Colbert is the general manager, I don't think that Callahan had any of that. So I don't think there's any complaining there. Now, the idea for Mount Amy to erupt after the Raider game, fire the coach, and for the umpteenth time, what feels like 4 or 5 years in a row, we have had a grand plan at the end of a season that immediately after the Titans go out and propagandize their plan, immediately they say, yeah, our plan sucks. We're scrapping it. We're starting over. And I think that's the thing that is bothering a lot of fans. It certainly bothers me that they spent an entire offseason talking about how great their new triumvirate of decision makers were, pumping the Pee Wee program. And now here we are 6 weeks into the season and they fired the coach.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the plan has been imploded because they fired Brian Callahan. I think that we all could have seen that this was an option within the plan. This was a failsafe. Their whole thing is based around roster development, roster acquisitions, player acquisitions, and the coach is independent of that. Like, whether that's fair, whether that's unfair, I think it was more of a duo than a triumvirate from the beginning. And if it was a triumvirate, the third person wasn't Brian. It was either Amy or Burke. I think we all understand that this is an organization that when your philosophy is preaching draft, develop, retain, when your philosophy is preaching roster patience, when your philosophy is preaching get the right people in the building, that none of that actually talks about coaching. The development talks about coaching, but if you identify the right players and if you get enough of your players in, it's about system, it's about culture, it's about you develop them within the Raven way or the Packer way or the Chief way. But and they think it's all gobbledygook. Like culture is winning and winning is culture. That's all it is.
I agree with
that's
that.
Their plan.
But that is an insanely flawed plan. Bill Polian has a gold jacket for being a Hall of Fame general manager. And he says the head coach is the most important part of the operation because he's the one who touches the players every day. And so when you're talking about how their plan was to build a culture or their plan was to develop or their plan was to take a quarterback with the first overall pick, I mean, you better hope you have a good coach with those kind of key pillars in place, because while Barry Switzer can inherit a team that is already good and has already won Super Bowls and win another one with them, I mean, when you've got the number one overall pick at quarterback, the coach is a very important part of whatever plan you have. And so if they thought that, you know what, well, just kind of roll with this coach and then figure it out, well, you've already fucked up. And that's why I think this organization's so stupid.
And I totally respect that perspective. I'm not saying you're wrong about that. People have heard me say this on the show before. My long unified theory about coaching in professional sports is unless you've got a top 5-1 or a bottom 5-1, it shouldn't affect you on game days. The other 6 days of the week, coaching matters. But on game days, on those Sundays, having a top tier coach, having a bottom tier coach matters. Most other coaches are the same. Most coaches are functionally going to give you the same thing on game day. And so if you have one of those coaches who is actually hurting you on game days, you got to make the move. And I think the perception is that Brian was doing that. Now, if we're talking about those other 6 days of the week, if we're talking about how does a coach actually matter?
Oh, he sucked on those other 6 days too.
Sure. But my point is, if the plan was we're going to build through culture ideas instead of football ideas, it didn't really necessarily matter who the coach was, because what they want is high, what was the phrase they always like to use? High intentionality, low ego, I think is one of their buzz phrases. They want the Titan way. They want to establish, it just means they want people who aren't assholes. That is their whole plan right now. That is step one of the plan, is get the assholes out, get the collaborators, get the people who are going to work hard, get the people who are going to, I think the thing that stuck in my head was something Chad told me, which was the Titans want to hire people, draft people, and sign people who care about the Titans being better off when they're gone than while they're there, who want to build the Titans into something greater when they are inevitably fired or retired or cut or whatever it may be. And that, when I hear that, has nothing to do with X's and O's. And when you're replacing a coach, ostensibly it's because of X's and O's. So you could plug anyone who is a good coach into this, and as long as he's not a jackass, he fits what they're looking for. So it's not a defense of it, but it's simply when you say, oh, they've abandoned the plan. I don't think the plan has anything to do with the head coach. If it's Andy Reid, spectacular. That's a great head coach. But you can plug any style of head coach into this plan, and it still be the plan.
Yeah, that whole buzz phrase about intentionality and leaving the Titans in a better place than you found it, and that sounds good. That sounds like something that you could say to convince the owner to give you full autonomy of the football team. But that's not really, to me, that's not a solution of how to make a football team better. I think the coach really does matter. Like if I were to hire a general manager, I mean, the coach would be a big part of the discussion.
Sure.
It would be, and I said this last year. I actually said this when before they fired Vrabel. I think you remember this. They went to Jacksonville around Thanksgiving 2023 and just got housed.
Yeah.
And I mean, they had Amani Hooker trying to guard Calvin Ridley, and it was a disaster.
And I said in that game, if I remember right, Levis had like a 140 passer rating by accident. It was
because
really
they ran like 3 trick plays and they all worked.
Yeah.
So I said then, I go, all right, if I own the team, I wouldn't be saying anything right now, but at the end of the year, I'd clean house. I'd get rid of Rand, I'd get rid of Vrabel, and I'd start over again, and I'd hire an experienced football general manager to come in here and run the team, and the football general manager picks the coach, and we go from there. And everybody called me racist because Rand Carthon hadn't had a year, and they couldn't look past the fact that I'm like, so you want to promote Rand Carthon even though they've had a bad year, and they did end up promoting Rand. But the reason I say that is because I always believed that the way a real football organization works, a real good one, is the owner hires the general manager. The general manager becomes the chief football executive. The GM picks the players, the GM picks the coach, the GM manages the coach, and then the GM is working with the coach. He finds somebody that fits his vision. He finds somebody whom he respects and whom they're on the same page at the beginning, and on they go. And then to me, the owner's job is that when egos start to get in the way, to kind of massage it between the GM and the coach, but the GM runs the organization. Instead, the Titans keep saying, well, okay, we're going to put Vrabel with this general manager. He doesn't respect him, but it'll be fine. It'll work. And then it doesn't work. And then they say, okay, well, now we're going to let the GM pick the coach, but the GM's incompetent. So now we fire him. Okay, well, we're going to elevate the GM's assistant GM, and he's going to work with the coach he inherits. And then he's also going to hire a GM, and we don't really know. And to me, the coach is a big part of the program here. Like, if you're trying to figure out how to turn this shit around, the coach, if I'm sitting here talking to a general manager candidate and I'm saying, how are we going to turn this around? The coach is a big part of that.
Jared, I think that we are using coach capital C, lowercase c differently. I am not saying that who the coach is doesn't matter. What I'm saying is the specific version of the coach can be any good coach. It needs to be a good coach.
Sure.
But like, it didn't specifically need to be Brian Callahan for their plan to be their plan. That's all I'm saying.
It specifically needed for it to not be Brian Callahan for their plan to work.
And if that's the case, they made a good decision. Like, if that's the logic here, if they needed it to not be Brian Callahan, the decision makers made it not Brian Callahan. Not a defense of the decision makers, but if that's the logic we're walking here, in order for their plan to work, they needed to get rid of Brian, so they got rid of Brian. If that is the case you're putting out, thumb up.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. The next thing, though, is it does feel like the fans' anger has turned from Brian to Brinker. And Brinker had his name on the press release. Brinker, it really was a Brinker press conference. Borgonzi was there, but it really felt like a Brinker press conference. I have to ask, what has this guy done to get this much power in this organization? And is he next on Amy's chopping block What do we think of Chad Brinker, and what do we think of the way it looks like Chad Brinker is running the organization with Mike Borgonzi?
The only way to answer that first question is to have Amy answer that first question, because I've heard Chad say on the record he doesn't really know. Like, it was a decision that was made. He's here. He's in this position. He's grateful for the position. He is doing what he thinks is right within the position. But it's hard to just say, this is why anyone has been entrusted with the situation they're in. It's the situation they're in. It's what he is. Why? Amy's never told anybody. So we can speculate, but we can't say for certain this is why, this is what power he gets, this is why he has the power. We really can't even say that about Borgonzi. We know the resume, we know all the talking points from when he was hired. We can't say this for certain about anybody who doesn't have a track record. Like, Mike Vrabel gets hired in New England, we can say, well, this is what he did in Tennessee, that's why you hire him. When somebody's done it before, you can say it. But the fact of the matter is, I believe there is one, maybe two active general managers in the NFL who had been a general manager before. It is not a position that gets recycled. Whereas head coach, I believe a third to half of all coaches in the NFL have had either interim head coaching or head coaching experience at some point before their current role. For some reason, there is a disconnect here of, if you fail as a coach, that's learning and you get a second chance. If you fail as a GM, there's a stink on you, you never get to do it again, or you never want to do it again. So for 30 teams in the NFL, their general manager is a completely unproven commodity who has watched another GM do it before, who has, oh, I watched Brett Veach, or, oh, I watched Bill Polian, or this or that. And that is their resume. That is their experience. Is that good enough? No, it's not. It's not good enough that Adam Peters' resume is, I watched John Lynch do it. Then he does the job well. It's not good enough that Rand Carthon's experience was, I watched John Lynch do it, and he did it poorly. This whole thing of, oh, what's a GM's credentials? I think, so like, Trent Baalke had done it before. He got a second chance, and he stunk the second time in Jacksonville. Who else? Who else am I missing that is a return GM? I guess if you want to say Ryan Cowden is technically a return GM, even though he's technically not a GM and he technically never was a GM before, like, who are these guys that have overwhelming, I've done GMing before and I was good at it and now I'm on the market? Like, if you're good at this, you retire in that job. So it's the credentials part of it does bother me a little bit.
So my theory behind this, and I think this is a really big problem in the NFL, is that general managers don't get second opportunities. And we see guys get interviews that were former GMs, but again, they usually don't get a second opportunity in the league. My theory behind this is that NFL teams, when it comes to coaches, a head coach gets fired and he goes to being a coordinator somewhere else. Matt Eberflus was an embarrassment last year, and he's now the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. So then when that guy's defense plays well, the owners watch it on TV, the fans see it on TV, and they're like, hey, Cliff Kingsbury might not have won a game in Arizona, but look at that offense. And so they're like, well, we should hire him. You never see the assistant general manager on TV.
Right.
And for these guys that become general managers, I'll use John Robinson for an example. I mean, he's still getting paid by the Titans. If John Robinson were to go be assistant general manager of the Seahawks, you would not see him on TV, and he would have to give back his Titan money. And who's to know, what he does or what the other assistant general managers do or things like that. That is that is a massive problem, in my opinion, in the NFL, because I've talked to former general managers, and that includes Robinson, but I've talked to a lot of former general managers, and the amount of these guys that would say, like, yeah, the thing I learned was XYZ. And I'll give you an example. I had Mark Dominic on my radio show before the draft in 2024. And I said, if you were the general manager and you were sitting there at 7 and Mark Dominic had a massive hard on for Brock Bowers. And he basically was saying, hey, if Bowers is there, you pick him, slam dunk Stockton to Malone. And I said, if Brian Callahan and Bill Callahan are telling you, oh my God, Mark, we've got to take the tackle. We got to take Joe Alt. We have to take him. What would you do? And he said, when I was 35 years old and a general manager, I probably would have said, oh, okay. I would have been convinced. He says, 55-year-old me now that's already been fired, we're going to pick the guy I want to pick and then we'll figure it out. And I think that is a massive systemic problem in the NFL amongst these moron owners who have no qualification to be owners, is that instead of saying like, hey, this guy was a pretty good general manager. Thomas Dimitrov was a pretty good general manager with the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah. Let's give him another chance. It's, oh no, we want the young guy that we've never heard of before. And I don't know why that is.
No, I agree with you. It is a gigantic problem that nobody ever gets a second chance in this industry. And everybody is guessing who's good. It's a guessing game. Coaches, we have a little bit better of a founding, and maybe you're right. Maybe it has to do with them not being seen on television. But you'd like to imagine that at least a third of the league's owners are smart enough to know that none of these people are on television. Nobody saw Mike Borgonzi on television, and he got the job because he was around good football. That was qualification enough. He's a good talent scout. He watches a lot of tape. He's a grinder. He's around good football. Thomas Dimitrov, to use your example, around a lot of good football, built a Super Bowl team. He's been around good football. He's not on television right now either. He didn't get these jobs. So it's probably what you're saying, and it's probably a little more than what you're saying of it's hard to sell a product of we're getting somebody's seconds.
Who do you think the best general manager in the league is?
Probably DaCosta, maybe.
Okay, so there's one general manager who has been fired in the NFL and has been given a second chance. Do you know who that is?
I know there is one. I'm trying to remember who it is right now.
It's Howie Roseman.
Is it Roseman? Okay.
So Howie Roseman was with Andy Reid in Philadelphia, kept his job when they hired Chip Kelly, then got reassigned upstairs while Chip Kelly ran the Eagles. And then Jeffrey Lurie realized, fuck that up, got rid of Chip Kelly and put Howie Roseman back in. It's the best general manager, in my opinion, in the NFL.
Yeah, he's up there. He's certainly up there.
And he's failed. Like all the things people bang on Robinson about, he missed on these first-round draft picks. So is Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman drafted Andre Dillard in the first round. But you learn from your mistakes. And these owners are so stupid in this league, they don't let any general managers learn from their mistakes. Instead, they get so excited about, let's hire the guy from the Chiefs because maybe he's got a little bit of that secret sauce, even though Mike Borgonzi was what when they drafted Patrick Mahomes? Lower level scouting director kind of. I mean, he was very low on the totem pole when they drafted Patrick Mahomes. But it's like, well, we got to get him because he comes with the Chiefs. And I just think that's why, morons screw up more than anything else. I mean, Jason Light is a good general manager in Tampa Bay. He's missed in the draft. Again, this is a different, kind of thing with the Titans because, with Borgonzi, Nick, I saw two guys at the podium on Monday night. I saw one guy who was incredibly nervous and who was trying to justify his existence in Chad Brinker. I saw another guy up there who was completely disinterested, who wanted to be anywhere else but up there at that podium. And my theory is Mike Borgonzi regrets taking the job because he's not actually a general manager. No matter what you want to say he does versus what Brinker does versus he is not the chief football executive of the Tennessee Titans. And I think he regrets taking his one shot at being a GM because you only get one shot. Circumstances do not matter anymore on this crap hole of an organization. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I don't necessarily know if I'm going to full-throatedly agree, but I will say I think that's what's going to make it really, really tough for this team to hire a head coach that's on the rise. I think that to go back to what we said about Vrabel versus Callahan, of you hire based on the thing you didn't like about the last guy, I think that the thing that they're going to say was the lesson from Callahan is about experience, and they're going to limit their talent pool, and they're going to go out and get a guy who's been a head coach before, and they're going to ride that kind of experience because that makes sense. But I also think that part of that's going to come down to, if you're a head coach who has to stake your ability on being able to do this for the first time, this is an organization that you don't want to be around right now. Like, why would a Joe Brady type who has never been an NFL head coach before, but is going to get his one shot someday, want to stake it on an organization that is this dysfunctional? Who are some of the other up-and-coming candidates that people love? Jesse Minter. You get your first chance to stake it on him. Why would he want to come here? All of these people on the rise, look at how difficult this is for Borgonzi. Look at how difficult this was for Callahan. Look at how difficult this was for Carthon, and we know some of that self-induced, but still, first-timers have not had a good run at this. So is it regret? I don't know if I'd say something that strong. I also just think Borgonzi's personality is such that he is never going to look interested or happy in front of a camera or microphone. I just don't think that is in his DNA. But I think that as this team moves forward from this, I said this when Callahan got hired, and I still stand by it. When your plan is to do what all the other teams in the NFL are doing, but be better at it, that's not attainable. The success of the Vrabel era was very much contingent on them doing things that nobody else in the NFL was doing and being a tough team to prepare for. And then Callahan Carthon or Callahan Borgonzi come in, and the plan is, this is what works in the NFL. We're going to do what works in the NFL. And suddenly you go from being the best at what you do to being the 29th best at what everybody else does. And then there are those 3 or 4 teams that are doing their own thing. If the plan is to keep building Packer Way or Chief Way or something, you're still just going to be a watered down version of what's working for other people. So you're going to have to be really, really, really freaking good at those things in order to make this work.
Yeah.
And they just aren't. And these people are not the people who seem capable of doing that.
What are you hearing as far as Brinker and Borgonzi's relationship? And what are you hearing as far as Brinker and whether or not he could be in the crosshairs of Mount Amy's next eruption?
Again, short of Amy saying something, I'm not going to say I've heard anything direct, but I do think that the perception that I think it is fair to say that Brinker is in charge. I do believe that Borgonzi has roster decisions. I do believe he's the one that is leading the personnel charge. But I do think that Brinker is the one who is in charge of the operation. He is the executive who is president, CEO, whatever you want to call it. He is in charge. Is that meaning he's in the crosshairs for Amy? As far as I can tell, him and Amy have a good relationship. As far as I can tell, him and Amy are in lockstep. Now, that could change any day. That could change any week. I have no indication right now that Amy has a list and she just crossed off the top name and now the second name's become the top name. Like, that is not the way that I read the situation. I read it as Amy has enabled Brinker to be her decision maker. And Amy makes decisions and Brinker makes decisions. And obviously Brinker reports to Amy. But in the situations where a decision does not need to be made by Amy, I believe Brinker is the one making that decision. And one of those decisions is to enable Borgonzi to be the football guy, to make waiver claims, to make trades, to make draft picks, to set agendas. But when it comes to picking a head coach, I think that all 3 of them are going to be involved in the situation. But I do believe that Brinker is probably the one who is going to have the most powerful voice in the situation.
Okay. So the other question I have is, who picked Cam Ward? Because Hutton was telling me that he thinks that Borgonzi ran the draft. And I'm like, that's fine. Setting the draft board and, when you're in the 4th round saying, hey, let's trade up so we can get Alec Manor, that could be a Borgonzi thing, whatever. The owner is not, even Daniel Snyder is not going to sit there and tell you to make the trade to go up and get Manor at that point. But who picked Cam Ward? Because that's the single most important decision that the team has made, deciding not to go the veteran route, not to go the trade with the Giants route, to take Cam Ward. And it already feels like, they've already swung and missed on one step of Ward's development. Was it Borgonzi? Was it Brinker? Was it Amy? What do we know about the picking of? Do we just assume that Borgonzi picked Cam Ward? What do we make of that?
This is not good radio, but this is something that I was talking about yesterday that I want to do more reporting on. I don't want to speak factually about something that I'm very, very interested in. I will say there were points early in the process. We're talking January, we're talking pre-combine, where I heard people who would have decision-making power say, yeah, I think we got a real shot at Sam Darnold here. Like, there were points where Matt Stafford was on the table if he was going to hit free agency. There were points where just about everybody but Rodgers was being talked about. And then mid-February, combine time, end of combine time, everything I heard was Cam's the guy. This is Cam. And that is just late enough in the process that you named Amy, you named Chad, you named Mike. We also have to throw Brian in there. We also have to talk about how hard are the coaches selling the prospects they like. Because if the job of the GM, in some ways, is still pick players who fit what your coaches do, there is also a possibility that there might have been some oversell because these coaches were aware they were on shaky footing and they knew that drafting a quarterback would turn things around more quickly and would have the chance of preserving this regime. I am not saying for certain that is what happened. I am just saying, as much as we can say, oh, Amy wanted to pick Cam because she wanted the quarterback as the face of the organization, or Brinker wanted to pick Cam because of this, or Borgonzi wanted to pick Cam because of this, we can also put the coach's influence in there. And if the timeline of when they fall in love with Cam lines up around the combine and around the 30 visits, that's when he's getting more involved with actually knowing the people in the building. And so I do believe that Borgonzi made the pick in the sense that that's his choice. They agreed on it. He is the one that sat on it and agreed, yes, this is what we need to do. But once it gets to that phase in the development process and the acquisition process, and they're that close to free agency, about 2 weeks before the start of free agency, that's when Shador was coming in for his visit, when Cam was coming in for his visit. That was all happening the weekend before free agency. That's when you made your decision. And that's when the coaches got involved. So it could have been GMs, it could have been front office, it could have been ownership. It really could have been coaches. And I want to know more about this.
So my theory, and again, all it is a theory. My theory is that it was a money thing because Borgonzi came in talking about the way they did things in Kansas City, and Sam Darnold absolutely represented Alex Smith in this scenario, which was get the guy who is the quarterback, get him, get that done, then figure out the rest of the team, then eventually find your quarterback. And then they immediately pivoted. And Brinker was talking picks the whole time, and they weren't interested in the picks. My theory is the difference between trading from 1 to 3 was $3 million in signing bonus. If you pick up the extra second rounder, that's another $5 million in signing bonus this year. But the real money is, okay, now you have to pay Sam Darnold. So you got to pay him $40 million. Then you'd have to pay the Giants' first round pick next year a signing bonus, which would be an extra $30 million. Then you pay the Giants' second round pick next year an extra signing bonus. I mean, now we're talking about $80, $90 million over the next 2 years. And that may be where, well, let's just pick the quarterback and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We don't have to pay the big signing bonus for the extra Giants pick. And we don't have to pay a quarterback because we've got Cam. That's just my theory.
Oh, I get that. Can I ask, just like purely, I don't know this answer.
Sure.
Where does the cheapness perception come from? I know the cash poor perception, but the cheapness, the making decisions based off of not wanting to spend, where does that come from for you?
Well, I think you go back to the days of Bud Adams, who was insanely cheap. I mean, he'd have like the strength coach painting the facility kind of stuff. And when you're that cheap, it permeates to where everybody's talking about it. I mean, I worked somewhere one time where the hosts had to buy chairs for the studio. It's like, What are we doing here? So that stuff kind of permeates. I also think, I mean, even last year when they spent all that money in free agency, they were still like 23rd in cash spent around the league. They have a bottom 5, bottom 10 payroll right now in the NFL.
Yeah, but we understand. We don't need to be manipulative. We know that's because they're not paying a quarterback right now. Like any team that's at the top of the league in payroll is because they're paying a quarterback $50 million.
That's not exactly true. I mean, yes, for the most part, but more than half the league's paying a quarterback $40+ million.
Yeah, and that's my point. Since the Titans aren't, that is why they're not near the top of the league.
So then I should be able to, if I'm willing to spend the money, the Houston Texans are at the top of the league, and the Houston Texans aren't paying their quarterback.
That's true. That is an exception. You're right about that.
So if I don't have to pay the quarterback, and everybody else is paying, $300 million for a team, then I could pay $300 million for a team, and I can have a better team because I'm not paying the quarterback.
Yeah, and that's the theory of rookie quarterback contracts. We all understand that.
Right.
But when you're talking about 2023, they were on the Levis contract, and they went out and spent. Who else could they have gotten that offseason? Or 24, whatever it was.
Well,
Who else could they have paid for?
I think number one, I think it was more so the decisions they made, i.e. Cushenberry over Biotish, or whatever. But they could have, first of all, the Titans have never been into the trade market, which I think is almost better sometimes than free agency. A team will have a guy making $10 million, and the team will think, he's probably really more of like a $4 million player or a $6 million player. So we're going to ask him to take a pay cut. Player says, no, I'm not interested in taking the pay cut. The team says, okay. And then they either trade him to somebody for almost nothing, or they just outright release the player. We haven't seen the Titans in on those lately. And if you're going to spend money, that's where you spend the money, is you say, oh, okay, you want to drop Deebo Samuel? Well, then we'll trade you a 6th in next year's draft, and you'll send back a 7th in this year's draft. The only player they've done that with is Jarvis Brownlee, and he wasn't making any money.
Yeah, you use the Deebo Samuel example, and I'm out on him, so I don't necessarily agree with that one. But in general, I see the point you're making. I don't know. I think the problem is if you are always moving to win now, you're never going to win. And so making those moves this year probably wouldn't have worked. Well, making those moves last year when you were making all of those moves, I see your point.
I'll give you an example of a move that was made that I don't think the team thought they were going to compete, but it was very important to the team being able to compete. And that was the DeMarco Murray trade. DeMarco Murray wanted out of Philadelphia. And so DeMarco Murray was traded for a pick swap in the 4th round. And for 2 years, DeMarco Murray was a workhorse running back for the Tennessee Titans while they had a 2nd and 3rd year quarterback. And so that's the kind of player that I feel like you need to go get. And if you're willing to spend the money, you can go get pretty much every offseason.
Sure. There are also only 5 positions that matter in the modern NFL, and only one of them, maybe 2 of them, ever actually hit the trade market. Quarterbacks matter, receivers matter, edge rushers matter, cornerbacks matter, tackles matter. Tackles are never going to hit the market. Quarterbacks are almost never going to hit the market. Very seldom do corners hit the market. Almost never do top-tier edge rushers hit the market.
Sam Darnold hit the market this year. He might be the best quarterback in the league right now.
He's not the best quarterback in the league, but I see your point.
PFF.
Sure. Okay. Let's use that. He's not the best quarterback in the league, and we both know it. But I don't think that you're going to, if you're talking specifically about the microcosm, about the 2024 Titans, the one thing they did not do, and it was a massive failure on their part, but the one thing they did not do was go get a tackle. They didn't get a right tackle. And if that's what the thing that was holding that team back was, who was trading a right tackle? We have to talk about literal circumstance.
Here's where I will use, this, and this is really going to get me going because this is one of my big things. So in 2023, Vrabel and Carthon went very cheaply into free agency, and there was a theory that, well, the cap, they couldn't. Now the cap's fake. And I could argue that all day, whatever. Mike McGlinchey was out there in free agency. Is Mike McGlinchey an all-pro tackle? No, sir, he is not. Is Mike McGlinchey a starting tackle in the NFL? I think he is.
Yeah,
I think he's a solid starting tackle.
I agree.
So Mike McGlinchey was out there, and Mike McGlinchey wanted to come to the Tennessee Titans. And the Titans never made an offer. And so the Titans passed on McGlinchey in 2023. Then in 2024, they put themselves in a position to where they had to draft a tackle, and they could say, well, there was nobody there at right tackle to go get. Mm-hmm. That's when you spend the money.
That's fair.
Is you say, hey, there's a tackle. There's never a tackle out. There's a tackle this year. That's when you buy the tackle, because he'll be your tackle 3 years down the road. That's the kind of stuff where, sure. Again, in a vacuum, you could say, well, who should they have gotten in 2024? Yeah. And I would have said, by the way, Jermaine Illuminor, who is the starting right tackle of the New York Giants for $7 million. But there was an option in 23, and they just didn't want to spend the money, which, again, I think is because they don't like to spend the money. They are the classic, don't want to spend the money on the front end, then end up spending more money on the back end.
We're also not mentioning, and this is, again, bad evaluation, but we are not mentioning that coming off of his rookie year, people thought NPF was actually a pretty solid right tackle.
Jared Stillman was not part of those people.
That's fine. I'm not saying you did.
Were you?
I was sold that he could be the 18th best right tackle. He could be the 24th best right tackle. Like, I never thought he'd be a superstar, but I watched that rookie year. I'm like, oh, there's some developmental aspects to this. He can get better. This is a former 5-star. This is a smart kid. This is a guy who broadly seems like he has the traits to get better. And then he didn't get better. And I would usually rather bet on youth and potential than going and getting Jermaine Illuminor. The problem is that was a really bad bet. And I will admit I was wrong about it. And I will admit a lot of people were wrong about it. But going out and spending big money on McGlinchey when you had a rookie who started 16 games at right tackle for you the year before and wasn't the problem on that team. He became the problem on the next two teams, but he was not the reason that 22 team collapsed. Replacing him would have been a second guessed move, and then nobody would have ever known he stunk. And it would have been second guessed in perpetuity of, oh, we had this guy. Why'd we spend all this money? It's a very annoying situation to have been in, because you would have been right, but it didn't feel like the right move at the time.
Did to me. I'm just saying. Now, I do want to hit on this. Coaching candidates. I think that it's going to be one of 4 names, and you can take every other name you want and shove it. I think it is either going to be Mike McCarthy, Matt Nagy, Arthur Smith, or Mike McCoy. I think those are the 4 logical choices for the next coach of the Titans. Jeff Hafley, who didn't cross paths with Brinker in Green Bay, he's a wild card because he was a college coach and he's a defensive. I think it's going to be one of those 4 guys. Nagy, McCarthy, Arthur, or McCoy keeps the job. Your thoughts?
There's a difference between think and want. I think you're on the right track. Names I like that I think are probably longer shots. I really like Vance Joseph as a second chance head coach candidate, especially with what he's doing in Denver right now. I don't know. Nagy feels too convenient. A lot of the times when there's just a convenient name at the beginning of has connection with a former guy, I rule that one out. McCarthy less so, because look, Mike McCarthy's been an NFL head coach since 2006. He's made the playoffs 12 times. The Titans have been in Tennessee since 1997, and they've made the playoffs 10 times. Clearly, McCarthy is an upgrade over anything the Titans have ever had. Nagy was a mediocre to slightly above average head coach at the beginning who fell off the rails with a quarterback he never melded with. I have a harder time saying that is a slam dunk hire, but as we talked about before, give people the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. I don't know. I think there are other names I like. I've liked Minter for a while now. I don't think this is the right fit for him, but I like him as an option. I keep getting very like nostalgic romantic and thinking just bring Jim Schwartz back and see what happens. That's not going to happen, of course. But
I could see them bringing Schwartz back as the defensive coordinator to Arthur Smith as the head coach.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that we're going to focus on those types of candidates for a long time. And I think McCarthy is going to be the clubhouse leader for as long as he doesn't say, I don't want to work there. And he's never going to say that. So he'll be the clubhouse leader. He'll be the top candidate on the board. This is the reason you fire a coach earliest, is because you get the longest look at coaches. But right now, if I'm saying who would I want, it would be a defensive coordinator who's been a head coach before. I believe there are 5 of them in the NFL right now. I don't necessarily think you need to lean offensive guy. I would rather have some young up-and-comer be my offensive coordinator, kind of like the Falcons model right now of get a Raheem Morris, get somebody who's been a head coach before, and let Zach Robinson be the ascendant guy who grows with your quarterback rather than just go get Arthur and have a quarterback's guru right there. But whether they choose to lean defense or not, I yet to know. It's too early in the process to say.
Again, I'll give you those 4 names or the field. Who's going to be the next? Who is going to be the next coach of the Titans? Those 4 names or the field?
I would say like 55% your 4 names, 45% the field. So
I think I'd go 75% those 4 names.
I don't feel that Nagy and McCoy are necessarily serious candidates at this point. That's why I'm dinging it a little bit. McCoy will be a serious candidate if they win this weekend. McCoy will be a serious candidate if they show growth, but I haven't seen it yet, so I don't want to put him in the serious camp quite yet.
Okay, I want to end the show with a hot take. You ready for this?
Go for it.
I think the Titans win on Sunday against the Patriots.
Interesting. I am so the other way. I thought for months and months and months, from May when the schedule was announced up until about 3 weeks ago, I had the Titans winning this game. And now I think the Patriots win by 20.
So after they beat Buffalo on Sunday Night Football, I said, because I covered Mike Vrabel's entire tenure as the coach here. And I said, that's the Vrabel special.
Yep.
And with the Vrabel special, what goes up must come down. And I looked at the Saints and the Titans, and I said, they're going to lose one of these 2 games. And I thought it was going to be the Saints. And then they didn't lose to the Saints, which means it has to be the Titans. Titans get the interim coach bounce. There's no way, for some reason, Vrabel cannot get his team, at least when he was the coach of the Titans, up for bad teams. He couldn't do it. I mean, we watched them go to Cleveland and watch Deshaun Watson basically punt the football 20 yards backwards and still get housed in that game. And then the next week beat Joe Burrow by about 25 points.
Right.
That's Vrabel.
No,
and so
funny.
this would be the most inexplicable loss if they were to lose this game. Just like when Mike Vrabel got smoked by Zach Wilson and Corey Davis after they got smoked by Tyrod Taylor after they ran the gauntlet of Allen, Mahomes, Indianapolis, and LA the week Derrick Henry broke his foot.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was doing a Boston radio show yesterday, and I was telling them about this exact same thing about the Vrabel games, the Vrabel specials in Buffalo, and the host goes, well, what about the games when we're favored? And I just kind of looked at him. It's like, what about the games when we're favored? I'm like, I'm not saying anything. I'm not going to say it.
In a 2-week period, Mike Vrabel is head coach of the Tennessee Titans, lost to Kyle Allen and the Carolina Panthers, and then beat Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, remember the time he beat Russell Wilson and then lost to Zach Wilson?
Remember the time that he beat the defending champion Eagles and then lost to a rookie Josh Allen?
Yeah, it is.
They annihilated New England at home in 2018.
Yeah.
Then got smoked by Indy the next week.
Yeah.
That's Vrabel. So that's my hot take. I think the Titans are going to win this week. And I think Mike McCoy is a more serious candidate than anybody's giving him credit for, simply because Amy Adams Strunk is ultimately going to make this call. And I saw her get comfortable with Mike Mularkey, and I can see the same thing happening with Mike McCoy.
I'm not ruling it out. I just do not have it high on my list yet.
Especially if he beats Vrabel.
Oh, yeah. No, if they win this weekend, that is a very, very different conversation.
Like if you sat down with Amy and you gave her the option, the best sex of your life, the best orgasm you've ever had, or you beat Vrabel on Sunday, I think she'd take beating Vrabel on Sunday.
Maybe I've been going about this all wrong. Maybe when I put in my requests for Amy, I need to tell them that's the question I'm going to ask.
Hey, you know what? This is a podcast, baby. You get it. We say whatever you want. Suss, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Great stuff here on the program. Braden will be back next week. Again, a football show presented by Sinkers Beverages. That's right. Going to get some cocktails and enjoy the games this week. I'm a THC drink guy, Suss, just to be honest. Sinkers Beverages has it. They've also got all of your great choices. Nashville Scene Best of Winter, and of course, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. They've got the Real Texas Barbecue in the BNA. For Nick Suss, Braden will be back next week. This has been a football show here on the 440 Sports Network.